Hi and welcome to today's live chapter reading of Best of My Love by N.D. Jackson, courtesy of Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. 10 years ago. Nervously tapping her fingers, Andrea Larson waited inside the large glass-wall conference room for the meeting that would change her life. This was it. If everything went the way she expected, she would have the funding for travel website off the ground and could go home to start her life with Eric, her boyfriend since about the age of 8, but officially since the summer they'd turned 15. They had it all planned. In her hometown of Emerald Creek, they would get a good deal of the property. They even picked out a space to rent until people felt comfortable enough planning and booking their adventures online, and business took off. While they worked the travel agency, they would also work to open Eric's first restaurant. Eric would work the people end of the business, and she would do what she did best: computers. Dre could code and design with the best of them. No, better than the best. She completed her last final of her college career just 3 days ago, and when the time came, she would hang the diploma on her office, because for some people, that impressed the hell out of them. Not her, but some people. A perky blonde in an electric blue suit that fit like it had been made especially for her interrupted her thoughts. "Hi, Miss Larson. The big bosses are running slightly off schedule, but they should be here in about 15 minutes. Can I get you anything?" Dre nodded at the woman, wishing she had that kind of effortless beauty. "Sure. I think I'll take that water you offered now if it's no trouble." "None at all," she assured her, and disappeared again. Nothing but the sound of her stilettos echoing in the distance. Pulling her sticker-covered laptop from her bag on the floor, Dre opened it and typed out notes on other ideas she'd been playing with for the last few months. They had all taken a backseat to her need to obsess over every aspect of Travel Bitch, because it was her one shot to have exactly the life she wanted. Almost, anyway. One person was missing from the picture-perfect image in her head, but nothing would bring back her mum. So she tried not to think about it. This plan would allow her another part of her dream: Eric. They'd been best friends through elementary and junior high, then something more than friends the summer before sophomore year of high school. Like typical teenagers, they'd broken up and got back together a dozen times before graduation. But now they were rock solid, had been through 4 years of undergrad and 3 semesters of grad school. Solid and happy despite the long-distance nature of the relationship. No more, she reminded herself with a smile as his handsome face, shaded by a Cubs baseball cap, appeared on her screen. "Hey, you've got great timing. The big bigs are late, so I'm just sitting here waiting." As she and Eric talked, the knots in her stomach unravelled themselves, and her heart rate slowed when peace overcame her, the way it always did. "Otherwise you would have missed me." "I always miss you, Dre," he told her with a smile. But the smile didn't reach his big hawthorn blue eyes, and she'd heard the catch in his voice he'd tried to hide. "What's going on?" Suddenly everything shifted to serious, and a sinking sensation settled in her stomach. Eric sighed and raked a hand through his flop of caramel waves. "A few months ago, we had a party after Vista closed." He told her about the restaurant he'd started working at right out of culinary school. "There was this girl, Callista, and things got out of hand. It didn't mean anything, Dre, but we had sex one time." Because that made it better. She heard the words before he spoke them. Eric, her Eric, had betrayed her in the worst way imaginable. He knew about her past and how it affected her, but he'd gone and done it anyway. Bastard. "You had sex," she parroted back to him, wooden and stiff. "Yes," he said, anguish forcing his pitch lower like cheap bourbon. "Well, she stopped at the restaurant a few days ago to tell me she's pregnant." And? Because she could hear that nightmare was about to get much worse, soon. "And I asked her to marry me." Because that's how you deal with unexpected pregnancy in the 21st century. She went numb, and whatever else he said fell on deaf ears, and soon his voice faded to nothing. Male voices sounded in the distance, and she willed herself to get her shit together. This was neither the time nor the place to break her decades-long crying dry spell. Dre didn't cry. hadn't shed a tear since the day she'd put her mother in the ground, and refused to break the drought over a cheating, lying piece of crap like Eric, the former love of my life. Soon the Travelco guys filed into the room, all 6 of them dressed in expensive suits with equally expensive hair products and million-dollar smiles. She was not impressed, but Dre also knew she had made decisions. She had a few decisions to make, and they had to be made quickly. "Hey guys, who won the golf game?" Dre pasted on her friendly girl next door smile. Christian North smiled and took his seat at the head of the table. "Honey, golf is for the old folks. We young bucks play racquetball." That pulled a genuine laugh from her mouth, surprising the hell out of her. "And here I heard the tough boys play rugby." "And risk this handsome mug? I don't think so." The room erupted in obligatory chuckles before he turned back to her, his expression all business, and that suited her just fine. "We love Travel Bitch. It has impressive functionality, and the user interface is friendly for even the beginner techie. But the honest travel reviews of adventures big and small, and those off the beaten path are goldmine. That aspect will draw in our most important demographic, young and with tons of disposable income." His words hit her harder than they should have, considering she'd heard it at least a dozen times as other venture capital firms tried to entice her to sell. Sell. Just minutes ago what Dre thought of as a dirty word suddenly became not just possible, but inevitable. She wouldn't be going back to Emerald Creek now. She couldn't. Not when she knew he would likely be there, with her. It was time for a change, and a new plan. Christian leaned forward. "Dre, we know you have no interest in selling, but we're prepared to pay you handsomely for the site, its architecture, everything." And there it was, the moment when opportunity and opportunism coincided. Just how handsome are we talking? Like Brad Pitt and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, all hot and manly? Or Johnny Depp, he's hot and will keep the sheets warm but won't protect you from things that go bump in the night? The room was silent, but Dre had gotten over the notion of embarrassment after sharing a suite with 2 other girls during her first 2 years of college. Nothing quite got a girl over silly embarrassments like walking in on your roommate on all fours, her boyfriend behind her with a cowbite on his head, or worse, being caught in the middle of a self-pleasure session by the other roommates. Finally Christian smiled, his blue eyes glittering like the sapphires in his cufflinks. "Honey, we're talking Brad Pitt and Fight Club hot," he assured her. With a laugh, Dre gave the men news that stretched smiles across their collectively handsome faces. "In that case, we should talk numbers." Christian must have channeled his inner drama queen. He jotted down a number, folded the piece of paper and slid it across the table to her. "Try this number on for size." Dre blanked her expression and unfolded the sheet of paper. The number was impressive, far more than she'd expected to see at one time. But it was just a starting offer, and after a comical back and forth of silent paper scrap negotiations, they'd settled on a number. A number so big she could write her own ticket from now until forever. "Looks like you guys are the proud new owners of BeMyTravelBitch.com." And she was a very wealthy woman. Chapter 1. Wow, she panted and gulped as she stared at her bronze-skinned bedmate. "That was incredible," she laughed, still surprised that the wiry man she'd chosen to take to her bed this evening had been so talented. Normally her lovers were lacklustre on a good day, but her photographer for this job was sex on a stick. A very big stick. Dre sat up, reaching over to the night table for a long-forgotten glass of wine and took a long sip. "Ah, better." She smacked her lips with a grin and handed him the glass. He laughed. "The sound rich and smooth. Andrea, you truly are a breath of fresh air. And so very sexy." He leaned in to take the glass, kissing along her wrist and her sculpted arm. His feather-like kisses were slowly becoming addictive, but not as much as the way her name rolled off his tongue. "Besides, why are you surprised? Do you not know what they say of Latin lovers?" Oh yeah, she knew all right, but she'd gone and bedded him anyway. "I've heard, but you, Gustavo, are my first Latin lover, so I couldn't be sure." She threw her naked leg over his waist, letting the sheet fall down as she settled her body over his. Her small, perky breasts laid bare for his heated gaze. I mean, there are so many things, they say. She allowed a few drops of wine to drip down his neck, following the path with her tongue. She sat up and stared at her handsome, temporary colleague, his dark espresso eyes blazing with desire for her, despite the fact they had just sated themselves moments ago. As a rule, Dre didn't sleep with her contractors, but it had been a few months since she'd taken a lover, and Gustavo was both hot and talented, a perfect addition for 3 weeks in Hawaii. Grabbing her breasts and kneading gently, Gustavo cocked his eyebrows in amusement. Really, what is it they say? Dre laughed, wondering who that sexy voice belonged to, and surprised to find out it was her. She normally didn't get all giggly and coquettish with her lovers, but this one was a damn good time. He knew he was talented, but didn't take himself too seriously. Well, you know, she said, trailing her fingers down his toned and tanned torso. They say black guys are big. Her hands spread more than a foot apart. And they say French guys are the best at oral. She bit her lip and shivered slightly, thinking of how his lips and tongue brought on a powerful orgasm that would definitely go into the spank bank. And they say Russians are the best at foreplay. Gustavo laughed loudly before flipping their positions so she wasn't even sure it happened, until she found herself looking up into smiling coffee eyes. Then I must endeavour to prove that Latin men are the best of all. He laughed and dipped his head, capturing her mouth in an intense kiss that immediately turned her legs to pudding and soaked her thighs. Taking her bottom lip between his teeth and grinding into her, Gustavo groaned from the back of his throat and moved down to pull a dark berry nipple into his lush mouth. Your breasts are glorious, Andrea. I could photograph them until forever. Dre groaned inwardly. Why do they always start talking forever after a few orgasms? She tried to shake off his sickeningly sweet words, knowing they were just the flowery way in which he spoke. Instead, she tried to refocus on the current of electricity, rushing from her worked-over nipples and radiating throughout the rest of her sensitized body. Shut up and prove that photographers do it best, she laughed, wrapping her legs around his muscled hips and squeezing until his erection pressed against her eager, dripping core. 1 hour and 2 more adventurous sessions later, Dre sat at her desk, making a list of all the amenities she'd taken advantage of, and photographed and videoed so far. She was grateful for this new project, revamping the website for the grand reopening of a luxury resort. It allowed her a free oceanside bungalow and access to any and all features that struck her fancy. All she had to do was create 3D tours on the website so guests could be wowed into upgrading to the suites and bungalows. Making a list for herself and one for Gustavo, Dre blew out a frustrated breath. She'd done it again. Damn, what was I thinking besides who would give me the quickest and most satisfying orgasm? It was true. She never brought men back to her living space, her sanctuary. Not even when she was on the road, which she was a lot since her company Red Rocks Design had taken off. Before Hawaii, she'd stayed in Texas for 2 weeks, creating a website complete with an online ordering for a regional pizza palace. Before that, it was Ottawa for a maple syrup beer startup-looking company to expand into the rest of North America. In the last 6 months, Dre had spent a total of 10 days in her Los Angeles loft, in her own bed, enjoying her shower. The loneliness was probably why she'd allowed Gustavo to stay without a second thought. She knew when he stopped by to pick up the itinerary and talk about the final week of work, she would finally have him. In her bed. As much as she wanted to, she couldn't deny that it was loneliness had started to get to her. It was just a slip. It won't happen again, she muttered, turning her attention back to setting up the plan for her final week in Kauai. The buzz of her cell phone startled her in the dimly lit office area. She reached for it anyway and answered with her trademark brusqueness. This is Dre. Andrea, it's your father. She remained silent, but her gaze slid to the calendar on her tablet. It wasn't time for them to speak, not for months, in fact. They never spoke, mostly because she never answered his calls, and only bothered to call him once a year. On the date her mother had died, and he wasn't there for either of them. Okay. He sighed, frustrated, warring with whatever reason he'd had for calling. Shane has been hurt, bad. She's in the hospital and will be for a while, it looks like. JT beat her up. The doctors are working on her now. Shit. Dre knew he was trouble, but her best friend insisted he was a good man and a good father, despite all evidence to the contrary. What a joke. I'll get there as soon as I can. Thanks for the call.